Chinese intelligence officer reveals true magnitude of China's fake coronavirus crisis. For the good of the Chinese people, permission is hereby granted to copy, quote or reproduce this article in full or in part with the hope that these revelations will help to free the Chinese populace and the citizens of Hong Kong from the evil that has befallen them. I am a senior Chinese military intelligence officer and I know the truth about the coronavirus outbreak. It is far worse than the media is telling you. I am a Chinese citizen in Wuhan who occupies or perhaps occupied a high-ranking position in military intelligence. I am also a member of the Chinese Communist Party. As a senior official near the top of the party, I have access to a great deal of classified information and I have been involved in many top-secret government projects. I have a doctorate from a leading university in a Western country, which is why I am able to write my account in English. I have information that I believe could lead to the overthrow of my government. It is also relevant to billions of people outside of China, all of whom are now in existential peril. It will not surprise you to hear that if my identity were to be revealed, my life would be in grave danger, as would those of my wife and son. I ask you to respect the fact that I have stripped out of this account all facts that would make it easy to identify me. By now you will be familiar with the recent outbreak of 2019 NCoV, also known as NCP, or simply coronavirus. You will have heard that it originated in Wuhan, an industrial city in China, and that it came from an animal, most likely a bat or a pangolin, that was sold in a wild animal market. You will have been told that it is an influenza-like illness that can in severe cases cause pneumonia, respiratory failure, and death. Finally, you may have heard that although the disease is highly infectious, it is dangerous only to the elderly or to those who have a compromised immune system. The official lethality rate is approximately 2% or so. All of that is a bunch of lies concocted by the Chinese state with the tacit support of the US deep state and its friends in the European Union, Russia, and Australia, and spread by the docile media in all of those countries. Let me start by telling you that the world does not operate the way you think it does. Although countries like the US and China vie for global dominance, that competition is restricted to certain limited areas. In most ways, the two countries are more interested in cooperation so that they can stop other competing countries from gaining more power. They also have a shared interest in keeping real power out of the hands of their ordinary citizens. To this end, they have many different mechanisms by which they control the overwhelming majority of their media outlets. The Americans in particular have perfected the art of creating made-up divisions between their two main parties, which are designed to hide the fact that both serve the same masters. These same nations also possess technology that is far more advanced than you can imagine and which is kept carefully hidden from public view. This includes advanced artificial intelligence capable of undermining and deciding any election in the world, biological and chemical agents that can manipulate and control the thinking patterns and behaviors of citizens to terrifying degrees, highly sophisticated manipulation techniques using hypnotic practices entirely unknown to the public, and other things that I will not go into now. My point is that the great nations do not compete so much as work together. Their principal goal is to shield the true workings of the world from the uninitiated public. Let me return to the virus. Last year, large-scale anti-government protests erupted in Hong Kong. The Standing Committee of the Chinese Communist Party considered these to be a grave threat to the integrity and stability of the motherland. The US government and the EU both knew that the Chinese were secretly working on a biological agent that was supposed to make the protesters docile and obedient. Without going into detail, I worked on that project. We tried to develop a sort of spray that could be dispersed from helicopters or drones and that would lead to mental retardation and behavioral change. Naturally, as Hong Kong is one of the most open and international cities in the world, the party decided that it was too risky to release the agent in Hong Kong without first testing it. For this, it needed a great number of human guinea pigs. Two groups were identified for this. First, We rounded up a large number of so-called Islamic radicals in Xinjiang province and took them to what we called training camps. We had already been using these camps for human experimentation for several years, but the Hong Kong protests meant that we redoubled our efforts. We exposed the inmates to various alpha experimental agents. As these were odorless and invisible, the subjects were not aware that they were taking part in medical trials. The resulting high rates of cancer, premature dementia, suicidal depression, and death by organ failure could easily be suppressed, as the camps are located in very remote parts of our motherland. Once the initial experiments had yielded a beta agent, it was transported to Hubei province, where it was deployed in a special military testing facility outside the city of Wuhan. This was not even a particularly well-kept secret. The existence of this facility has been reported in international news. Even the fact that it is located close to the wild animal market is a known fact. By then our president had already introduced a social credit system that allowed us to identify disloyal, counter-revolutionary, and bourgeois elements in our society. Using the social credit scores which are taken from online activity, electronic shopping behavior and reports from informers in civil society, we selected some of the worst offenders. These included human rights lawyers and activists, Christians, homosexuals, artists, intellectuals, people who speak foreign languages, and other undesirables. Once these troublemakers had been collected and placed in the testing facility, we exposed them to the agent, which is biochemical in nature and spread in an invisible aerosol, akin to certain viruses. Initial results were encouraging, as we saw significant cognitive decline and reduction in higher mental processing facilities. Essentially, our undesirables were becoming mildly mentally disabled, which is precisely the effect we wanted to produce in order to pacify the restive population of Hong Kong. Unfortunately, it quickly became apparent that the agent also had other effects. About 1 week after the retardation set in, our subjects developed major anxiety and panic attacks. Eventually they developed symptoms akin to those of paranoid schizophrenics. At that point, their bodies rapidly deteriorated. They developed massive internal bleeding, the walls of their arteries dissolved, they bled out of their eyes and orifices, and their tissue disintegrated. To put it in a more direct Western manner, they started to melt. Death usually occurred through multiple organ failure. This was preceded by at least 5 days of severe agony which could not be alleviated by painkillers. It was at this time that I first violated our protocol. One subject, an elderly lady who had published defamatory cartoons of our president, begged me for death with such insistence that I took pity and shot her. I was reprimanded, but fortunately the complaint was dropped when I agreed to reimburse the cost of the bullet. I swore to myself never again to show such unnecessary emotion. We decided that our agent was unusable. It was far too destructive for our purposes. We wanted the population of Hong Kong to submit to us, we did not want to exterminate it. Naturally, our American friends had by then taken an interest in our work and asked us for a sample for their own research and testing purposes. They hinted that they wished to use it to resolve certain difficulties in Venezuela. Normally we would have agreed, as we maintain friendly relations with the CIA, but given the extremely toxic nature of the agent, we declined. This, as it turned out, was a grave mistake. The CIA was convinced that we had developed something very powerful and wanted to keep it to ourselves. They offered a great deal of money to one of our researchers. Foolishly, he agreed to sell them a specimen. We found out just in time for the handover and tried to stop it from happening. In the ensuing shootout, don't bother to look for it in the news, it was never reported anywhere. Several dozen people were killed. More importantly, however, the agent escaped. The shootout took place at the wild animal market, which has been reported as the location of the animal-to-human transmission that started the outbreak. But, of course, there was no such transmission, it was just the location where the CIA was supposed to receive the sealed vial containing the agent. The vial shattered when it was dropped by the trader who had agreed to sell it to the Americans. By now I understand you will be skeptical. If I really am who I say I am, why would I be sharing this information on the internet? Let me assure you that I am no friend of the Western system of governance. I love my motherland and I am loyal to the Communist Party. It has lifted hundreds of millions of my compatriots out of squalor and poverty. However, I am also a human being and I have a conscience. Most importantly, I have a wife and a son.